God, Neo made this look so much easier. Oh yeah, we're reviewing Doctor Strange, starring Benedict Cumberbatch, Tilda Swinton, Chiwetel Ejiofor, and Mads Mikkelsen. And maybe we'll talk about Buddhism and stuff. But first, I must bend the spoon. Hello, I've been told you're the greatest guru in all the lands, and I've travelled far and wide for your advice. Help me. My life is just empty and horrible. How am I supposed to live my life? Ah, dear seeker of truth, you come burdened with age-old melodies of suffering and the quest for meaning. But fear not, for the path to enlightenment is smoother than you may think. You see, the sublime secret to an effortless existence is this. Profess the loftiest of virtues, yet absolve yourself from needing to practice them. In doing so, you shall bask in the adoration of the world, without the laborious endeavor of actual self-improvement. Embrace the illusion of personal responsibility, my child. For why carry the weight of your own actions when you can conveniently shift the burden onto others? Let the world be your scapegoat, and you shall find solace in perpetual innocence. Should an opportunity arise to seize another's material wealth to fund, let's say, a certain addiction that brings you fleeting joy, do not hesitate. For is not happiness the ultimate objective in life? Seize it, my child, and leave behind the constraints of moral dilemma. Only when you can gaze at yourself and feel nothing but unadulterated joy will you pass the ultimate test of your spiritual ascent, and know you have arrived at the zenith of a life well lived. I hope you found this enlightening. That'll be $50. But I've only got 100 on me. That'll do. Thank you, come again. Thank you, come again. Well, that was interesting. Anyway, since I can't think of a good segue, this is Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange was a Marvel superhero co-created by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, emerging in 1963 with a warm reception, during an interesting time in Western philosophy. The 1960s was a time in which existentialism and postmodernism were beginning to challenge conventional Western philosophy and metaphysical assumptions. After the Dalai Lama's exile in 1959, the mystique around Tibetan Buddhism and other Eastern philosophies was growing in Western consciousness and offered some alternative answers on the nature of existence and reality. From this cultural and intellectual melting pot came Dr. Stephen Strange, a non-traditional superhero which acted as good social commentary for this time in history. Instead of relying on physical prowess or technological wonders that were dominating the comic book world at the time, instead, Strange is a brilliant scientific neurosurgeon who becomes the master of the mystic arts, protecting Earth and our reality from mystical threats beyond imagination. He embodies this fusion of Eastern and Western philosophy in a way that resonates with the questions and explorations of them. While Strange's journey from empirical Western scientific rationalism to a more intuitive Eastern spiritual emptiness view of reality may seem a shift from one to the other, it is in fact a nuanced commentary on the fusion of both. The character embodies Western and Eastern philosophies, reflecting the broader explorations of both, inviting us to question science and spirituality, reason and intuition. If traditional superheroes are either scientific or magical, then he is the philosophical superhero with awe-inspiring visuals to accompany them. Recognizing the immense potential of this narrative, Kevin Feige, the president of Marvel Studios, officially announced in 2014 his decision to greenlight the production of Doctor Strange on the big screen. Scott Derrickson was hired to direct the film, known for his work in horror films like Sinister, which made him an intriguing choice to handle the darker, mystical elements of Doctor Strange. His vision for the film included blending visual spectacle with an exploration of deeper philosophical and ethical themes, staying true to the philosophical source material. The foundational structure and themes of the script was written by John Spaihts, known for his work on films like Prometheus. Yet later, Derrickson and his friend C. Robert Cargill took over the writing of the film. Cargill, a former critic turned writer, has gained recognition for his work in the horror science fiction genres in his own right. It seems more like Scott Derrickson and C. Robert Cargill are the main two people who made this film, with Derrickson micromanaging most of it, and letting Cargill clean up the writing, telling him when he's wrong with it. It's clear Derrickson was passionate about his project, being a fan of Doctor Strange himself, having an affinity for exploring supernatural and metaphysical themes, and him having a critic under his belt who clearly knows his to fix the gaps in his writing abilities. It would appear the foundations of this film were as strong as those behind the comic. Doctor Strange is not merely a film, it's a doorway into the multiverse, a concept now deeply entrenched in contemporary Marvel lore. As we dive into the cinematic portrayal of this iconic character, it's essential to understand the profound legacy and rich history he brings with him, a testament to the enduring appeal of Marvel's foray into the mystic arts. But maybe it won't be that good. I mean, incredible acting, storytelling, and visual effects. How good can it possibly be? So, with that in mind, let's begin the grind. Okay, so the movie starts off in a library in some kind of temple, where a group of people using magic string up the librarian, cut off his head, and then collect it in a bowl for some reason. Why not just steal the entire book? Because the movie really needs to communicate these are the bad guys. I mean, murder, that's okay, but unnecessary vandalising library books? That's where I draw the line. And I guess Tilda Swinton really doesn't appreciate Mads Mikkelsen being a naughty boy either, so they run out of there and end up on the streets of London, before she traps them into some kind of mirror wall thing.
Hypocrite!
Okay, now this is just complete nonsense. Not the special effects or magic, those are incredible. The nonsense part is the depiction of London. Where's all the traffic, homeless people and rubbish everywhere? Tilda Swinton then goes Inception on their changing the buildings to force them on the offensive, and boy, she kicks ass. She takes them all on by herself in a way that almost seems effortless, yet not in a way that seems disingenuous or overpowered, as opposed to someone who is just extremely well trained and experienced in their art. Those of them that are left retreat, and she turns the buildings back, gets out of this mirror thing, and then walks off into unrealistically clean and nice London. Okay, Hollywood, now this is how you open a movie. In the first 4 minutes, the threat has been identified, the plot has been foreshadowed to, and the tone of what to expect from the film has been set. Engaging the audience like that is the difference between a good film and a bad film. Then we get to the opening of our main character, Dr. Stephen Strange's hands. Would be an awful shame if something were to happen to those hands. And if the hand intro wasn't enough, we see him performing brain surgery while being tested on his knowledge of music, which is a pretty good way of telling the audience he has a steady hand and a brilliant brain doing two difficult things at once.
Feels so good. 1977.
1978.
The album was released in 1977.
Wikipedia says
Check again. Status, Billy?
1977.
Oh, feels so good, doesn't it?
He is truly a genius, and if that demonstration isn't enough, the movie then shows him save a man's life by figuring out exactly why he appears to be brain dead but isn't, and then pulling the bullet out of his head using those steady hands of his.
A perfect bullet. Toxic metal. Leached directly into the cerebral spinal fluid.
Central nervous system shut down.
He's not dead, but he is dying.
You can't do it freehand.
I can and I will. Dr. West, cover your watch.
Now with his genius also comes an ego the size of Russia, who really doesn't think much of other people, including his own girlfriend, because she wastes her and his time saving lives in the emergency department. He's a brilliant doctor, but not a very nice person, caring more about medical scientific innovation and his career than the actual people needing help.
The work I'm doing is going to save thousands for years to come. In ER, you get to save one drunk idiot with a gun?
Now, at this point, it's worth disclosing the insight I have into this character, being someone I can relate to extremely well. Much like myself, this character is a borderline ENTJ, and in fiction there's not that many depictions of that combination. The only other two examples I can think of is Greg House from House MD, and Will Hunting from Good Will Hunting. Yet as far as I can tell, the character Stephen Strange is the most realistic and honest depiction out of the three, other than maybe his photographic memory that seems a little too fantastic. And there are those that claim these characters aren't ENTJs or borderlines, and those people are just wrong. So, without going too deep into MBTI or psychiatry, how can I describe what sets borderline ENTJs apart from everyone else? Well, a borderline ENTJ is a natural leader who's emotionally volatile. They're strategic, outgoing, and crave order, but can also be intensely emotional and struggle with relationships. Their drive for control and efficiency is at odds with their mood swings and impulsiveness, and this complex mix makes them both magnetic and challenging to be around. Generally, ENTJs couldn't care less about what others are doing, yet when they put their minds to something, they'll move the earth itself to make it happen. And generally, borderlines keep themselves emotionally detached out of fear of abandonment, yet when they do form an attachment, for better or worse, it's as good as unbreakable, even when they push them away. And boy, does Strange here exemplify both of those qualities.
They weren't about us, they were about you. Everything is about you.
He gets ready for some fancy speaking engagement, which includes showing off his ridiculous number of fancy watches, and driving dangerously in his Lamborghini as he rejects clients because they're not worth saving to him.
Crushed his lower spine.
Find me something worth my time.
Female with an advanced brainstem glioma.
You want me to screw up my perfect record?
Female with an electronic implant in her brain struck by lightning.
That does sound interesting.
By the way, you know what one of my favourite proverbs is? Pride cometh before the fall. Because of his recklessness, his hands were crushed, resulting in permanent nerve damage, meaning he'll never be a surgeon ever again.
No one could have done better.
I could have done better.
I could have done better. I don't know why I find it funny, because I agree with him. He likely could have done better. Yet it's still unwise to have that mentality, because perfectionism requires you to pay more attention to your flaws than your strengths.
You've ruined me.
Of course he ruined you. It wasn't you driving like an idiot that did that. Rather than focusing on what he did wrong to get in that position, he's criticising the guy who saved his hands from being amputated, and possibly even his life too. The arrogant self-centeredness and stupidity of that is incredible. But why is he doing this? Because his entire world has fallen apart, and he can't accept that. The goal he's set his life to is to be the best surgeon. ENTJs really are the most stubborn people in the world, that even failure itself can't make them give up.
Those tissues are still healing.
Pass a stent down the brachial artery into the radial artery.
Experimental and expensive.
All I need is possible.
He spends all of his money and time on desperate surgeries and physiotherapies, doing literally everything he can to fix his hands, with only minor improvements. And he just becomes more and more desperate and nasty to those around him. The movie really setting the tone for who he is.
This is useless. Answer me this, bachelor's degree. You ever know nerve damage this severe and actually recover?
One guy broke his back. A few years later, he walked past me on the street.
Bull. Show me his file.
If it proves your arrogant ass wrong, worth it.
Eventually, after he's spent all of his money and exhausted every option, his doctors give up on him, mirroring how he gave up on his patients at risk of them damaging his perfect reputation in his career. Except now he's on the receiving end of that selfishness.
I don't think you realize how severe the damages
Look,
are.
here's the thing.
What you want from me is impossible. I've got my own reputation to consider.
Wait.
Can't help you.
No.
Bonne chance, mon ami.
No, wait.
And it's at this moment we reach breaking point. He is now seeing rock bottom, and yet even now he's still not giving up. All he's going to do is become the most aggressive version of himself, refusing to accept the reality of the situation, because accepting that will destroy him. Right now, his world has turned inside out, upside down, and fallen on top of him, because things have not turned out the way they were supposed to. And because of that fact, he's needing to re-question everything, including just how much Christine loves him, seeing if she'll let him down and abandon him too.
Maybe it's time to consider stopping.
I'm not getting any better!
Some things just can't be fixed. There are other things that can give your life meaning.
Like what? Like you?
And this is the part where you apologize.
This is the part where you leave.
Now what's happening here is she loves him, seeing how much he's going down in flames, refusing to let this go. And she's trying to convince him to cut his losses and accept he can still find meaning, being some other kind of doctor or something. However, he's too dysfunctional to accept that, and sees her trying to undermine him in his goal as a betrayal, seeing not desire in her eyes, but pity. That pity makes him feel weak and scared she'll probably leave him if he can't be strong. And that fear of abandonment results in him pushing her away before she can push him away, while still deep down hoping she'll prove him wrong and won't leave him at his worst, no matter how badly he treats her. And this is what a borderline test looks like.
I can't watch you do this to yourself anymore.
Not too difficult for you, is it?
Yes, it breaks my heart to see you this way.
No, don't pity me.
Yep, there's the anger. He's pushing her away and she's letting him push her away, only increasing his fear of abandonment and helplessness.
We're not friends, Christine. We were barely lovers. You just love a sob story.
Poor Stephen charity case. Another dreg of humanity for you to work on.
Send him back into the world, hearts just humming. You care so much, don't you?
Goodbye, Stephen.
I have seen that exact same unmistakable look so many times, it's not even funny. Also, can I just say how unbelievably good this scene is? Obviously, there's all sorts of arguments a couple can have, yet in terms of this type of argument, it's never done right. This is the only one I'm aware of that has actually done it right. Almost everything in this argument is totally believable to me. Anyway, the physiotherapist sends him the file of the guy with the broken back who learnt to walk again, and Strange meets him for answers, since there's no way he should be able to walk with a complete spinal cord injury, that's simply not being scientifically possible. And he finds him playing basketball. Again, movie, you're very good at showing, not telling. Pangborn tells Strange, after he gave up hope, he went to Kathmandu to elevate his mind, and he found a place called Karmatage that healed him, and yet instead of learning more, he chose to take his miracle and leave, only concerned with his own happiness. Strange then spends his last dollar on a one-way ticket to Kathmandu to find Karmatage, being his last hope. While searching for Karmatage, he gets robbed by a surprisingly diverse group of thieves.
Your watch.
No, please. It's all I have left.
Then a man comes to save him and returns his now broken watch, which takes on a multitude of meanings. Now, if it's not obvious, the concept of time is a recurring theme in this film, offering various ways to interpret the significance of this broken watch, being his last remaining possession. On one level, it marks the end of his previous life. However, given the broader usage of time in this film, I think we can delve deeper. I believe the film uses time as a metaphor for one's perception of reality, both perceptions being abstract constructs that are viewed radically differently by traditional Eastern and Western thought. Given how complex these ideas are to demonstrate the difference between this fixed and fluid perception of reality, the concept of time is a good visual medium to demonstrate that cinematically. So this broken watch of his, being all he has left, could symbolise his loss of control over his perceived reality. His quest to fix his hands, which his scientific perceptions of reality couldn't provide, now prompts him to seek answers in a place that defies the laws of science, breaking his reality. He takes him to Karmatage, tells him to forget everything he thinks he knows, and introduces him to the Ancient One.
How did you correct a complete spinal cord injury?
Well, I didn't. He couldn't walk. I convinced him that he could. Your own body could be convinced to put itself back together in all sorts of ways.
You figured out a way to reprogram nerve cells to self-heal?
I know how to reorient the spirit to better heal the body.
The spirit to heal the body.
This story really did do a fantastic way of clashing these ideas. I mean, this is exactly how I imagine the first debate between a Tibetan monk and a Western scientist went. Needless to say, Strange is a little shocked, not being able to believe such complete nonsense. Being an ENTJ who's dedicated his life to the scientific method, aka the most stubborn kind of scientist you'll find. The very idea of spiritualism is like being handed a turd inside 2 slices of bread.
Stop being so cynical. Eat your
And for a borderline no less going to someone for help, only to be rejected in their most cherished beliefs? Cue the explosive reaction.
You're talking to me about healing through belief. We are made of matter, nothing more. You're just another tiny, momentary speck within an indifferent universe. I see through you!
Now there's a lot here to interpret. He is in her house, being extremely aggressive and disrespectful, even pushing her, and she's not taking any of his shit. She calmly and unemotionally pushes him back, pushing him into astral projection. Now, I believe astral projection in this film represents introspection, of one taking a look in the mirror and actually examining their thoughts and feelings in action. This scene is the equivalency of a Tibetan monk pushing someone back who pushed them and responding, "You claim to be rational, yet you let your emotions cloud your judgment. This is neither scientific nor wise. Science and spirituality are both quests for truth. They don't have to be mutually exclusive. Your aggression comes from a place of not understanding and closes the door to any meaningful dialogue that could lead to a greater understanding for both of us. Have you considered the limitations of your own perspective and how your emotions and beliefs further limit it? In turn, that would shock someone like Strange enough to actually take a look at themselves enough to calm down, seeing their inconsistency."
Open your eyes. Thoughts shape reality. Who are you in this vast multiverse?
Teach me.
No.
Again, quite a lot to unpack. I interpret her pushing him into the astral dimension, showing him a depiction of the vast multiverse being a calculated risk she made. Her deciding his level of stubbornness would require shocking him with a taste of the truth that he can't just ignore. However, what exactly is this calculated taste of the truth, as depicted as the multiverse that he can't just ignore supposed to represent? I think it could be something as simple as a philosophical question that generally scientists don't pay that much attention to. Generally, people of this Eastern thought tend to be guarded with their ideas, not wanting to share them with others until they judge they're ready, since they're very complicated ideas and very easily to misinterpret. However, generally traditional practices of these ideas aren't forbidden to be taught to outsiders. It's taught to be extremely careful since they are very complicated and can be harmful to people's mental well-being if they misinterpret it. In such a situation, as in this film, they very well may give a taste of this to someone who isn't ready, being literally the only way to open their mind to this in the first place, and yet going back to being careful the instant their mind is open. And that being the case, I'm aware how careful I need to be making this video and explaining these ideas, because not only I likely don't even fully understand them myself, but there will be a lot of people who watch this video might not completely get it. So to those watching this video, I'm going to ask you to try to have a lot of humility and start from the position that, even after watching this and thinking about it, you probably still won't fully get it. So, in this equivalency of a Tibetan monk pushing someone back who pushed them, and responding in a way to make them introspect on their behaviour, the next thing they would have said would be something like the following. Let me ask you a question, one that may appear simple on the surface but holds layers of meaning. If a tree falls in a forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? Sound is a vibration that travels through the air as sound waves, so yes, the tree would make a sound. Interesting. You define sound by its physical properties, but what about perception? Is sound not a sound until it is perceived? Does the falling tree have the same reality to a deaf animal as it does to a one with hearing? Whether the deaf hear or not, the sound still exists. To you, not to the deaf. What realities exist that you are oblivious to, Mr. Strange? Sound waves can be proved empirically using our 5 senses and the scientific method. Your entire world is built on the interpretation of your 5 senses. It's a framework constructed within your own mind. If every being on this planet were deaf, would sound still exist? You see, like me, you don't ultimately know anything. You only know what you think you know.
Teach me.
No.
Soon as she broke through his arrogance by making him see something he can't ignore, That's when she turns him away to punish his disrespect and to test his commitment.
Stubbornness, arrogance, I've seen it all before.
Gave me the power to defeat my demon.
We never lose our demons. We only learn to live above them.
5 hours later, they finally let him back in. The movie shows us why this watch was the one thing he didn't sell, it being a gift from Christine. And the next day, his training begins. She tells him about magic, how they can draw power from other dimensions and use that to influence reality. And I'm inclined to believe magic here is supposed to represent the abstract idea of agency and free will, at least as far as how we choose to perceive reality. The characters use magic to manipulate perceptions of reality, emphasizing the importance of perspective, and that is inherently tied to free will. She lays out to him this is years of study and practice, reflecting the amount of work it took him to get his doctorate, and then he gets to work. He reads pretty much every book he can at an alarming rate, enough to impress the new librarian called Wong, to show him some more advanced books.
Agent One's private collection.
They're forbidden.
No knowledge in Kamatage is forbidden. Only certain practices.
This seems to indicate that Kamatage values the pursuit of knowledge and does not seek to ban information. However, it does indicate certain practices are forbidden and regulated, such as giving people an education of something they're not ready to understand and use responsibly, which aligns a lot with real Eastern thought. And this also creates a good setting to demonstrate the East-West tension over this, since Strange's views of freedom of speech and knowledge don't appear all that compatible in this regard. This tension is a compelling aspect of the film, illustrating the challenges of merging different cultural viewpoints on ethics, responsibility, and the pursuit of knowledge. Wong tells Strange about Caecilius and his followers who killed the last librarian and stole the pages from this book, which is the study of time. The most interesting part cinematically is this is the second time in this film this book is referenced, and given time represents perceived reality, this book of time is basically telling the audience this is the highest level of their beliefs containing the answers he's looking for. And other than warning him to not steal any of these books, all he tells him about Caecilius is that he was a former master, and now he and his group are known as the Zealots. Speaking of which, now we see Caecilius and his followers in a church, translating and using the stolen pages from the Book of Time/reality.
We will now receive the power to destroy the one who betrayed us.
Other than the visual effects for this film being truly remarkable, pushing the limits of what could be done in 2016, which matches very well with the comics, but the details of the writing are so good, clips like this say 1,000 words. Her blackened eyes could mean by misinterpreting this understanding of reality and using it in a forbidden way that is considered unwise, it symbolises that they've gained a form of enlightenment that is all-seeing, yet not understanding. Their perception is now distorted in such a way that is harmful, yet they are now completely blind to how harmful it is. The eyes being the window into the soul, it reflects they've now been corrupted to their core, gaining a higher insight that they've used to blind themselves. And the fact they're using their newfound power to warp reality inside of a church, being the spiritual culture they were born into as Westerners, it reflects a total rejection of the respect of their or others' beliefs, now deciding for other people what is right and wrong, true or false. What this movie is doing is setting up this as a dark mirror to Doctor Strange's journey, and as a cautionary tale to what happens when power and knowledge is used unwisely and irresponsibly, being enlightening and destructive depending on how they are applied. But before Strange gets to that point, he still needs to work on the basics. First, he's being taught how to open portals to teleport, and as much as he reads and works hard, he just seemingly doesn't get it.
You cannot beat a river into submission. You have to surrender to its current and use its power as your own.
I control it by surrendering control? It doesn't make any sense.
Your intellect has taken you far in life, but it will take you no further. Surrender, Stephen.
She takes him to Mount Everest, saying you can last about 13 minutes before freezing to death, and then she just leaves him there.
What?
Surrender, Stephen.
No!
Now I interpret this magic of controlling portals to reflect the need to accept that some obstacles are beyond one's control in order to reach your goals. He has a serious ego problem of refusing to accept some obstacles in life are out of his control, and it is only by accepting his limitations he has any hope of navigating them in order to reach the place he wants to get. And to deal with that issue, she basically makes him decide what's more important to him, his pride or his life? And that is a totally realistic human response. And she does it by symbolically placing him on top of the tallest mountain, the symbol of obstacles, which is cinematically a fantastic method of making the point. He's refusing to accept obstacles as out of his control, and here is the tip of the obstacle that will kill him if he doesn't submit to it. When people are too proud for their own good, it takes something extreme like their survival instinct of self-preservation in order for them to just let it go. He lets go and gains his first lesson in humility, accepting one of the many paradoxes of life. This particular paradox speaks to the broader human experience where control is often an illusion, and surrendering to the flow of events can sometimes yield better outcomes than fighting them. Sometimes you have to give up control in order to gain control. Gaining his first real lesson in humility, he decides to clean himself up with a haircut and delve even deeper. He asks for books on astral projection, Wong refusing him since he doesn't think he's ready, and Strange just takes the books anyway. This reflects his new sense of humility to introspect on his own accord.
I'm told you question every lesson, preferring to teach yourself.
You told me to open my eye. Now I'm being told to blindly accept rules that make no sense.
That is such an ENTJ thing. They believe in rules, but only if they make logical sense. If they don't, then they will break and examine them until they do, and that includes how they're educated. Fun fact, a couple of years ago I got caught speeding and had to do a speed awareness course. And the woman that was doing the course was so bloody mad at me because I was the only one in the classroom that was questioning all of these rules and pointing out all of the holes in their reasoning, as opposed to just mindlessly repeating back to her what she was saying. Realising how quickly he's advancing, insubordinately teaching himself, she decides for his and others' own good to teach him some more advanced stuff, to have a safer method to practice. She shows him the mirror dimension, a mouldable world that looks just like our own, but doesn't affect the real world, and can trap you there if you don't have your sling ring to open portals. I think this represents certain forms of meditation that focus on imagination and possibilities, and the need for the sling ring to not get trapped there is the need to have goals and mindfulness to ground oneself to reality, else you just end up lost in fantasy land.
Just how ancient is she?
No one knows. Only that she's Celtic and never talks about her past.
At this point, it's worth mentioning in the comics this character was an old Tibetan man, I guess possibly representing the Dalai Lama. And some people were really upset by this, yet not because they changed her to a woman, but because they changed her to being white. These same people also didn't seem to mind them changing Mordor to being black. Make of that interesting form of progressiveness what you will. Me personally, I have my own issues when they change characters, especially when it's just because of Hollywood executives just ticking boxes so their films appeal to more audiences. I don't mind as long as it's done in a way that improves the story and respects the source material, just like Samuel Jackson being cast to play Nick Fury. In this case, I believe it is. Their reasoning was they wanted Carmitage to be a more universal place of wisdom, drawing from multiple philosophical and mystical traditions to discuss broader themes related to the nature of reality, time, and the self. And you even see this in how they're dressed, and the design of the buildings. You can't place them to any one culture, and that is a good improvement that works well with the source material without replacing it. And on top of that, did any traditional practitioners of Tibetan Buddhism even complain about this? I mean, their beliefs don't exactly have much in the way of caring about external characteristics like race or gender, being more focused on internal qualities of wisdom, compassion, and enlightenment. It's always a sad state of affairs when someone is being offended on someone else's behalf, when that person themselves aren't offended. Mordo tells Strange about Caecilius, explaining that he was much like Strange, a smart man who lost everything, broken and searching for answers. However, Caecilius was too proud to fully grasp the wisdom of her teachings, ultimately leading him to misinterpret and corrupt the lessons for his own ends. He also introduces him to relics, being powerful magical items, but you don't choose them, they choose you, symbolizing the notion of fate. Some things are beyond one's control that you can only accept or reject. Strange also shows how he's been repeatedly reaching out to Christine, only for her to mostly ignore him. He really does love her, despite her repeatedly rejecting his attempts to reach out, nor reaching out herself. While eating an apple, Strange decides he's finally ready to read the Big Book of Time, wanting to master what all of this is really about. The book teaches him that time is not fixed but fluid and can be controlled, but merely reading about it isn't enough. he decides to immediately put it into practice.
Okay, first open the eye of Agamotto. Oh my.
Now, since this is the part of the film he's actually learning about what this is all about, I guess this is the part I should actually explain. Firstly, I believe the Eye of Agamotto represents the safeguards for these doctrines, requiring a great deal of wisdom and knowledge in order to unlock it. And what is inside of it? The Time Stone. In the MCU, there are 6 stones called Infinity Stones, as old as the universe, and each of these stones control an aspect of existence. The Time Stone is the one that controls all of time. So right now, he's reading a book telling him how to use this stone to control time itself. So, what does that represent? I believe that all of this is a metaphor for the Two Truths doctrine, with time representing reality, since time is a good visual medium to demonstrate this cinematically. And again, this is extremely complicated stuff and is very easy and dangerous to misinterpret, so don't take what I'm about to say lightly. These ideas have been worked on and refined for about 2,000 years, hence all of the wisdoms that come with them do serve an important purpose and should not be taken lightly. And I'd also like to make it clear that these are my interpretations of how the Two Truths doctrine might be symbolically represented in the film, as opposed to the filmmaker's stated intentions or the traditional Buddhist understandings of these terms. So, with all that said, what is the Two Truths? Basically, without trying to misrepresent it, it's the idea that there are 2 separate ways to understand the nature of reality, and they are both equally true and false at the same time, being a bit of a paradox. The first one is what is known as conventional truth, which is more familiar with scientific understanding. Conventional truth is what we all agree is reality. This spoon is a spoon because we all agree this thing is a thing, and we agree it's called a spoon. Now, it's possible in future this spoon may in future identify as an Apache attack helicopter, and everyone in society will just agree spoons are no longer spoons. I don't know what the future of trans aircraft holds.
Hop in! But sir, I said hop in.
All I do know is at the present moment this is a spoon, because we all agree that this is a spoon. And that is conventional truth. Anything in existence that you or anyone labels as existing is something which is conventionally true to someone. Then there is the other kind of reality, and that is ultimate truth. Ultimate truth is the acceptance that this spoon doesn't actually exist. We didn't invent spoons, we made them up. We made everything up. Without a consciousness to perceive and define something, then there is no something. Even the label of ultimate truth is in itself a conventional truth, because ultimate truth is the inherent emptiness of existence. Consider for a moment how exactly you know with a 100% certainty that your perceived reality does actually exist. You base everything on your 5 senses, yet if your brain was hooked up to a matrix simulation, all of your 5 sensory inputs could be controlled and faked by someone else, and you'd never be able to prove otherwise. And if your brain is hooked up to a computer, who's to say your thoughts themselves even belong to you, and you only have these thoughts because someone else is typing them right now? There is actually zero way you can prove any of that one way or the other. This spoon, we don't know if it's real or not. We only think that it's real. It's as equally plausible that it's real as it's not real. And these are the 2 truths. Now, these 2 truths aren't supposed to be compartmentalized, rather accepting both of them side by side at the same time. However, it is forbidden to combine them, since the results are disastrous. When people use ultimate reality as an excuse to selfishly change and corrupt their conventional reality on a whim to avoid suffering, very bad things happen. And this is exactly what Caecilius and his followers did, and what Strange is doing right now.
The dark dimension, eternal life.
No! Tampering with continues is forbidden.
Dangers of performing that ritual.
You want to get stuck reliving the same moment forever, or never having existed at all?
Do not tamper with natural law. We defend it.
I think there's a lot more symbolism here, because what's he doing while reading this book? And what's the first thing he does with it? He's eating an apple, and then he uneats the apple. In the Judeo-Christian spiritual foundations of Western society, the apple is highly symbolic, and not just because one fell on Sir Isaac Newton's head just before he came up with gravity. The apple in modern times is the symbol of the forbidden fruit from the Garden of Eden, and that adds another layer of complexity to this scene. The abridged version of the book of Genesis is that God created the first man and woman called Adam and Eve, and lived as immortals blissfully in the Garden of Eden, being a utopia. Yet God only has one rule for them, which is to never eat the forbidden fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, for it will kill them. Eve, however, being convinced by the devil in the form of a snake that to eat the fruit will make her as knowledgeable as God, she convinces Adam to eat the fruit with her. Soon as they do, they gain knowledge, including the knowledge that they're naked and vulnerable. Their minds are now conscious to the world around them, which includes all of the pain and suffering in the world. As punishment, God banishes them from the garden, taking away their immortality and forbidding humanity to ever be allowed to return to this blissful utopia. This is the concept of original sin, that because of that first sin humanity committed of pursuing knowledge, we are to suffer because of that knowledge. So what's Strange doing here? He's eating an apple, symbolising he's choosing to pursue knowledge to learn the ultimate truth, and then he uses that knowledge to unlearn that knowledge, to reject original sin, chasing happiness, wanting to go back to Eden. And that is mirrored very well with the very first thing Caecilius and friends do to warp and manifest the church out of existence the instant they gain this power. Other than them being shocked he was about to do something so stupid and dangerous, they're more shocked than anything he even had the ability to do this, being something that takes students decades to master, and he just taught himself how to do it in a few months. They tell him what the mystic arts is really about, that as sorcerers they safeguard the world against mystical threats, and have done for thousands of years ever since Agamotto founded it, who sounds a lot like a metaphor for Buddha. Agamotto, other than building the Eye, he created 3 sanctums around the earth, in Hong Kong, New York, and London. The existence of these sanctums creates a protective shield keeping other dimensional mystical threats out, and the sorcerers protect the sanctums. They tell him one of these threats is Dormammu, an infinitely powerful entity that rules the dark dimension, a dimension beyond comprehension, that exists beyond time, of both infinite power and insatiable hunger for consuming other dimensions. This is the dimension Strange almost drew power from, and Caecilius and friends did. Now I believe the dark dimension represents the dangerous allure of using ultimate truth as an excuse to selfishly corrupt conventional reality into a personal utopia free from suffering, when it's dysfunctional since perceiving conventional reality requires a group effort and will lead to isolation and vulnerable ignorance of good and evil. Dormammu embodies the destructive societal consequences resulting from that, as well as personal demons of fearing that destructive chaos of the unknowable. And the sanctums simply represent public traditions and rituals that serve as the foundational systems to understand and navigate conventional reality. Like this video, for instance. Strange tells them he's not interested in fighting a mystical war, only coming there to heal his hands. Yet then, before anyone can react, Caecilius blows up the London sanctum, throwing Strange into the New York sanctum and separating them. He looks around the place and finds a relic being a sentient floating cloak. But just then Caecilius attacks, killing the master of this sanctum, and then fighting Strange using his powers to warp reality. You ever been in a debate with someone who keeps moving the goalposts of reality, arguing in bad faith? This just might be the fight scene equivalent of that. Now, other than all of this being incredible, Strange, although struggling badly since he's still a student, he still somehow takes them all on by himself, being outnumbered by those powered by the dark dimension. To be fair, I've been there once or twice. I mean, it's not easy to win a debate against a group of people warping reality on a whim, but not impossible. He goes on one-on-one with Caecilius, and would have died if the cloak didn't help. So, yep, Cloak and ultimately fate chose him, deciding he was worthy of this wisdom and ability to rise above his limitations. With this new help, he traps Caecilius in what I can only describe as an adult toy. Oh yes, harder daddy, harder. In the comments, does anyone know where I can get one of these things, for science and stuff? Then these two have a little debate, as two men of science studying mysticism.
You are a doctor, a scientist. You understand the laws of nature. This world doesn't have to die. We can all live forever.
What do you have to gain out of this new age dimensional utopia?
Eternal life. Time kills everything.
What about the people you kill?
Tiny, momentary specks within an indifferent universe.
It's always fun when you take a look in the mirror, isn't it? Hell, Making this channel, seeing what I actually sound like, does generate that look. This movie really does a good job capturing that. Their plan is to hand this world over to Dormammu, since in a world in which time and reality don't mean anything, they perceive this as true happiness. And unfortunately, this does reflect many scientifically minded people who study this without humility, then end up going full circle and using this to reject all in reality that offend them and makes them unhappy. He tells him the Ancient One is a hypocrite, drawing power from the Dark Dimension herself, which is why she's lived for as long as she has, and why Dormammu isn't their enemy. Strange isn't convinced though, taking issue with the fact he's a murderer, showing he's not completely heartless after all. Then another zealot stabs him in the chest, and his cloak once again saves his life. He gets himself to hospital, getting Christine to treat him. I guess that's one way to get her to respond to his emails. After he passes out, he goes into his astral form, and so does the other guy, and they have a fight on the astral plane, and given it's life or death, Strange kills him. And since I regard this as introspective, that could imply his objections to Caecilius caused him to consider his views on killing. He and Christine have a heart-to-heart, mostly him apologising for how badly he treated her.
I am so sorry. I was a complete asshole. I treated you so horribly and you deserved so much more.
This is a pivotal moment that signifies multiple layers of change and realisation. It can be seen as a rite of passage for Doctor Strange, transitioning from egocentricity to a broader understanding of his relationships and responsibilities. This is the first time we see Strange genuinely vulnerable with someone, both physically and emotionally. He is often portrayed as a self-reliant and egocentric character, but here, he is in need of her help, symbolised by the very act of stitching, a form of healing that he can't perform himself. He goes back, finds the others, and impressed by him successfully defending the New York Sanctum all by himself, she makes him the new master of it.
Master Strange.
It is Doctor Strange. I swore an oath to do no harm, and I have just killed a man. Became a doctor to save lives, not take them.
The conflict within him upon seeing he can and will kill if he has to, not matching up with what he believes about himself, is an important step on his journey towards greater wisdom and self-understanding. It's through grappling with our darker capabilities that we often arrive at a deeper understanding of who we are and what we must do to align our actions with our beliefs. It also shows his humanity he tends to hide, that although he can and will kill if he has to, he genuinely finds it abhorrent. They have an argument, and he calls her out on drawing power from the Dark Dimension, and Mordor is in denial about that, not being able to handle his master, that he believes in, preaching one thing yet doing another. They regroup, knowing it won't be long before the Zealots try to attack the last two remaining Sanctums, and right there and then the Zealots attack the New York Sanctum again. Then, just as it's about to blow up, Strange traps them in the mirror dimension.
You can't affect the real world in here. Who's laughing now?
Asshole. I am.
Can't escape, right?
Their connection to the Dark Dimension makes them more powerful in the mirror dimension. This wasn't cleverness, it was suicide.
Firstly, it needs to be said again that the special effects in this film is incredible, both genuinely pushing what was possible and honouring one of the best things about the source material, which was the incredible artwork, which was designed to reflect the incomprehensible nature of these ideas. The creators get a massive gold star for that, since it could have been so easy for them to miss the mark and go Michael Bay mindless explosions and stuff. But this idea of the Dark Dimension making them more powerful in the Mirror Dimension, that's what I find really interesting. If the Dark Dimension represents using ultimate truth as an excuse to selfishly corrupt conventional reality, and the Mirror Dimension represents certain forms of meditation that focus on imagination and possibilities, then this scene might actually reflect the importance of tolerating the intolerable.
No knowledge in Kamatage is forbidden, only certain practices.
What is Strange doing here? He's seeing a group of delusional people with toxic beliefs doing harmful things, and rather than debate them, he's trying to take control of the situation by forcing them to shut up and force their ideas back into their head. History, however, proves censoring harmful ideas never works, only making them stronger, especially when ideas are meant to corrupt reality. Without debating them, you isolate their ideas, and that isolation only makes those ideas far less likely to change for the better. It actually makes them more likely to change for the worse. You can't defeat toxic ideas by trapping them in imagination. You have to face them head-on, painfully and repeatedly. After one incredible fight scene involving the reality of the entire city being warped like a Rubik's Cube, the Ancient One comes in at the last minute to save Strange and Mordo.
It's true.
She does draw power from the dark dimension.
Now it's worth mentioning that although she is drawing power from the dark dimension, other than keeping her alive, she doesn't actually use this power in the real world, only in the mirror dimension, and her eyes aren't blackened either. She allows herself to consider warping reality any way she likes inside of her own mind, exploring different avenues of thought to prepare for scenarios she wouldn't have considered otherwise. She is allowing herself to think the unthinkable, to venture into morally grey areas perhaps, but in a safe space where those thoughts or powers do not bleed into actions that would corrupt society or reality at large. What if I were to decide a spoon isn't a spoon, but an Apache attack helicopter? What would be the implications of that? This explains why her eyes aren't blackened, because she's not letting this temptation blind her moral judgment or ethical responsibilities. She's using it to examine them in the meditative space of the mirror dimension. The weight of that, the constant struggle to not let this incredible potent power spill over from her imaginative exercises in her mind into actions in conventional reality, would be an unbearable form of suffering, much like immortality being the only part of this she does practice. Yet this job has to be done by someone dealing with not just the external mystical threats, but also from the internal too. She's learning this knowledge as much as she can to better deal with it, yet she's not practicing it outside the mirror dimension.
No knowledge in Kamatage is forbidden, only certain practices.
They fight, and Caecilius defeats her the only way he can, by sacrificing one of his own. Strange gets her to the hospital, yet she's dying. Yet she doesn't appear that bothered about that.
So many years peering through time, but never further.
You think this is where you die?
You have such a capacity for goodness. You always excelled because of your fear of failure.
It's what made me a great doctor.
Kept you from greatness. Arrogance and fear still keep you from learning the simplest and most significant lesson of all. It's not about you.
And that is fundamentally what is wrong with him. He's terrified to let go of the illusion of control and accept the words, "I don't know." That's what prevents him from just allowing himself to exist, and allowing others to just exist too. It's only when we're humble enough to let our fears be, to live above our personal demons, it's only then those obstacles stop holding you back in life. When you can reach that point, you can see how meaningful it is to create the world with people, as opposed to all by yourself. The fact she's telling him this while she's dying with complete acceptance of that fact speaks volumes.
You asked me how I was able to heal Pangborn. I didn't.
He uses magic to walk.
He had a choice, to return to his own life or to serve something greater than himself.
So I could have my hands back, my old life.
You could, and the world would be all the lesser for it.
Now pay attention to that. She's saying the world would be worse off if he uses magic to fix his hands. What could that mean? Well, if magic here is supposed to represent the abstract agency of free will, then this isn't about the choices for fixing or not fixing his hands. This is the choice of whether or not he accepts his ill fate or not. She's encouraging him to use his free will to not erase or correct the conventional life-altering experiences he has endured that are beyond his control, but to integrate them into a newly defined sense of purpose. To fix his hands would be to lose something immeasurable, a hard-won wisdom that has cosmic implications far beyond himself, that only comes from accepting knowledge and all of the pain and suffering that comes with it. It is a plea for him to embrace his role as a co-creator of a shared reality, to accept his limitations as part of his humanity, and to wield his exceptional abilities in the service of a greater good.
I've hated drawing power from the dark dimension. But as you well know, sometimes one must break the rules in order to serve the greater good.
I've watched this scene so many times in my life, yet after spending a few days analysing this scene, not only I'm realising just how good the writing is, yet I realise the subtext. She is pleading him with her dying wish to embrace his losses and suffering in life for the greater good, just as she has, needing her successor as Sorcerer Supreme to carry that burden that she won't be alive to carry anymore. She dies, Christine comforts him, showing she still cares, and he accepts maybe she was right, that there's other ways to find meaning and save lives than being a surgeon. She kisses him after he tells her that he doesn't want her to go, but then she goes, being just one more ill fate in life for him to accept. Interestingly, this movie is paperclipping Strange losing his hands and his career, to losing his love. They broke up right after his doctors turned their back on him, and he's tearfully letting her go right after considering letting go of his past life. And the fact that his cloak is wiping his tears away, being the wisdom and responsibilities of his new life being the only thing to comfort him, fantastically underscores that. Now this was a lovely scene and all, but here's a valid question. Where are the Zealots? Strange being a little busy dealing with the Ancient One dying and all, you'd think maybe, just maybe, would be an ideal time for them to attack again. Speaking of which, after waiting for Strange to be done with his coffee break, the Zealots attack the Hong Kong Sanctum. Mordo is having a bit of a moment, struggling to accept his master's hypocrisies, and blaming her for this situation that her use of the Dark Dimension had the knock-on effect of drawing Caecilius towards it. Strange slaps him out of it, making it clear they don't have time for this, and they head down to Hong Kong, only to realise they were a bit late to the party.
Sanctum's already fallen.
The Dark Dimension. Dormammu is coming. It's too late.
Nothing can stop you.
So, Caecilius has succeeded in corrupting conventional reality so much that society is collapsing into the dark void that is the Dark Dimension, bringing with it the chaos, destruction and derealisation personified by Dormammu. Strange, however, not content with allowing society to fall apart, decides to take control of this situation, breaking yet another one of their rules by using the Time Stone to reverse the Zealots' corruption of reality. However, Strange's manipulation of natural law to counteract the Zealots' own tampering doesn't go as planned. Although the ensuing fight scene is incredible, and Strange mostly manages to undo the damage, he ultimately can't completely reverse it before the Zealots break free from his spell and counter-attack. So what does all this mean? At first glance, it might appear as if Strange has successfully set things right, but a closer look reveals his actions raise a plethora of ethical and philosophical questions, in tune with the film's core themes. By using the Time Stone, Strange essentially alters conventional reality, much like the Zealots, even if his intention is restorative.
Breaking the laws of nature, I know.
This action reflects a form of attachment to a specific outcome, contradicting Buddhist teachings on the impermanence and fluidity of reality. Thus, his actions make him disturbingly similar to the Zealots he is opposing. A real-world equivalent would be a monk who, in response to a group of misguided individuals, doesn't merely defend himself but goes on the offensive, with an emotional attachment to cure their delusions. Disrespecting others' views cannot be cured by further disrespect, nor can one impose their understanding of the light on another's free will. The Zealots breaking free from his spell and the ensuing battle underscore this point, serving as a potent reminder that true resolution is not so easily attained. Fighting their corruption of reality only addresses the symptoms but not the root cause, which lies within the individual's own perceptions and choices. Realising the futility of fighting them and attempting to control others' free will by making them see the light, Strange decides to travel to the Dark Dimension and face Dormammu himself. I believe this symbolises his acceptance that you can't fix societal corruption by fighting those forcing their delusional views on others, by forcing your views on them. It doesn't work that way. You don't fight corruption of one's reality by engaging in the corruption. The only solution to any of that is focusing on being the change you want to see, taking responsibility for how you are negatively affecting society. In his case, he's overly attached to their misguided views and the damage they are causing. He has that attachment because he is afraid of darkness and ignorance, of living in a world without answers to help explain and navigate it, and hence them destroying reality brings that very darkness and ignorance. He's afraid of darkness and ignorance because he's afraid of suffering, failure, and death.
Isn't it beautiful? A world beyond time, beyond death.
That lies at the root of his fears, being the demon he must face and accept, and to face them he must go into the ultimate truth of nothingness. He doesn't go to the mirror dimension, he's not looking at his actions of the real world in the safety of imagination. He's facing his fears head on and going into nothingness itself.
Dormammu, I've come to bargain. Dormammu, I've come to bargain. Dormammu, I've come to bargain.
You cannot do this forever.
This is how things are now.
You will suffer.
Pain's an old friend.
He has gone into the depths of his personal hell, facing his personal demon head on, and he's imprisoned himself with it, so it'll hurt no one else but him. You know, his little bit of an anger issue, where do you think that came from? At the root they came from his fears, and these fears are demanding to be let out onto others, making him suffer until he does. Yet he doesn't care. He's reached the point of not just knowing his fears, but actually accepting them, letting them hurt and destroy him forever. When you can reach that point of just completely embracing your core fears, like Batman choosing to work out of the Batcave or something, then this demon no longer has control over you. You gain control over it.
You will never win. No, but I can lose again and again and again forever. That makes you my prisoner. No! Stop! Make this stop! Set me free! No, I've come to bargain. What do you want?
When he's finally reached the point of his demon backing down, realising he has no control over him, he quite literally rises above it and tells him to leave everyone else alone and to take the zealots with him.
We never lose our demons, we only learn to live above them.
Having reached the point of embracing his fear of failure, suffering and death, he loses his over-attachment to all built on top of them, including his need to stop the zealots and make them see the light. Now he's reached the point of letting the zealots corrupt the part of the society they live in, and letting them suffer the consequences of their own action.
What is this? It's everything you ever wanted. You're not gonna like it.
Strange lets them choose blissful ignorance over harsh realities, and in true karma or causality, whatever you want to call it, they reap what they've sown and go back to the prison that is Eden. A real-world example would be someone who chooses to be a heroin addict, or gets caught up chasing utopian ideological dreams, or simply can't accept negative criticism to the point of deplatforming it. Chasing happiness almost never results in it. They've saved the day, yet Mordo is still disillusioned with the paradoxical nature of their rules, him having a very black and white approach, believing you either follow the rules or you're part of the problem. His perspective is a form of ethical absolutism, rigidly believing in rules above all, lacking the ability to see the complexities that life is made of. A more in-depth understanding, it shows he never truly understood the Ancient One's teaching of impermanence and fluidity of reality. He had internalized her teachings as inflexible, rigid laws to be followed dogmatically, rather than as guidelines for understanding the intrinsities of life and the ethical choices it often presents. While Doctor Strange evolves to understand that ultimately we know nothing, the world being far too complex to be fully understood, Mordor's inability to reconcile this truth leads him down a different, darker path. With the only thing guiding him being his beliefs in rules and karma or causality, he leaves them, deciding all of these actions will have consequences.
The bill comes due. Always. I will follow this path no longer.
As Mordor's character arc sets the stage for his role as Doctor Strange's main antagonist, his journey serves as a cautionary tale about the pitfalls of viewing the world in stark absolutes, without considering the nuances and complexities inherent in ethical and moral decision-making. Strange and Wong head back to Kamar-Taj, realising they'll need to prepare and elect a new Sorcerer Supreme in order to defend the Sanctums now that they're vulnerable, which is probably the only bit of bad writing in this film. It was only earlier that day he found out about all of this and decided he wasn't interested in fighting this mystical war, and yet now he's in complete acceptance like he's been doing this for years. Granted, being brutally killed repeatedly in a time loop for God only knows is bound to have a hell of an effect, yet that effect isn't demonstrated very well. The pacing is mostly good, yet it could have been done better. Strange accepting his role as Master of the New York Sanctum, and first in line for the position of Sorcerer Supreme, he wears his broken watch and accepts his broken hands. He could have used magic to fix both, and he chose not to. He's reached the point of acceptance of his loss and limitations that make up part of life. Whether that's losing the woman he loved, losing the career and dream he worked hard for, or losing his arrogant need to control and understand the universe. He learns that the pursuit of perfection and control can often be a veiled form of escapism, a way to avoid facing the deeper fears and uncertainties that make us human. By embracing these flaws, he has not only made peace with himself, but he has also prepared to lead others with wisdom and empathy, acknowledging that wisdom often arises from our vulnerabilities, and that leadership requires an acceptance of imperfection, in oneself and in the world. And of course, it wouldn't be an MCU film without a couple of cutscenes. One being a teaser to Thor Ragnarok, and the other is months later with Mordo checking up on Pangborn.
The true purpose of a sorcerer is to twist things out of their proper shape, perverting nature, like you.
This is my power. Mine.
So things don't turn out so well for Pangborn, having his magic taken away and then presumably killed afterwards. And since I regard magic in this film as representing agency and free will, I think Pangborn is the equivalent of someone in a wheelchair in denial about their handicapped position, believing it doesn't limit them in any way, and then learning the hard way what happens when you don't accept your limitations. And Mordo? I think he represents the other side of the spectrum of Caecilius. When you misinterpret these doctrines, you'll either use ultimate reality to reject suffering and knowledge, or you'll use suffering to reject ultimate reality and turn into a psychotic killer. Mordo's departure from the Ancient One's philosophy reveals he failed to grasp the essence of her wisdom, which speaks to the ever-changing nature of reality and the need for moral adaptability. His path illustrates the pitfalls of ethical absolutism and dogmatism, serving as a counterpoint to Doctor Strange's more nuanced, flexible approach to morality and use of power.
Why are you doing this? I see at long last what's wrong with the world. Too many sorcerers.
And with all that said, that was Doctor Strange. Well, pulling apart that film was exhausting, and yet enlightening. Now, I tried to keep my reviews as balanced as possible, so was there anything I didn't like about this film? The pacing could have been done better. Overall, it's good in the sense they did everything in the right order, and fast enough to keep the audience's attention, yet they almost did it too quickly. The instant he first used the time stone, and the instant they tell him the truth, and he rejects fighting this mystical war, immediately he gets brought into this war, and there's no mention or anything in the film about the odds of that. Imagine what would have happened if the Zealots attacked just 20 minutes earlier while he was still eating his apple. What then? They should have spread it out a little more, or maybe created a direct connection, like his use of the time stone somehow allowed the Zealots to break through their defences or something. So yeah, that could have been done better. Other than that, I can't actually think of anything wrong with this film. They stayed true to the source material, which was already good to begin with, and they successfully transferred that story cinematically in a way that conveyed the ideas, and did it in an entertaining way. Now, some critics have argued that the film doesn't delve deeply enough into its philosophical themes, opting for visual spectacle over intellectual exploration. However, this approach is consistent with the original comics, which often used magical metaphors and intrinsic symbolism to hint at deeper ideas, rather than spelling them out explicitly. In this way, the film remains true to the source material, inviting audiences to engage in their own interpretive journey. Doctor Strange is not just a narrative, but a complex tapestry of ideas woven into the fabric of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, reflecting a rich philosophical background that transverses Western empiricism to Eastern spirituality for ethical and philosophical explorations, as evidenced through the contrasting journeys of its characters. Doctor Strange himself evolves from a self-absorbed surgeon into a morally nuanced guardian of reality, his journey reflecting the film's overarching message, that life's complexities cannot be navigated through rigid dogma or self-centered beliefs. Mordo and Caecilius, however, while initially seeming like straightforward antagonists, become complex figures that embody the pitfalls of ethical extremism. They mirror two sides of the same coin, Caecilius seeking to reject reality's complexities and hardships in favour of self-centered beliefs, and Mordor imposing his own rigid dogmatic interpretation of it, rejecting the humility of saying the words, "I don't know." In the end, Mordor and Caecilius become tragic figures, being a powerful reminder of what can happen when ethical and philosophical teachings are misinterpreted or applied in a manner that lacks depth and understanding. They act as cautionary tales that emphasise the perils of falling too far on either side of the moral spectrum, making Doctor Strange an exemplar of balanced power and ethical adaptability. Strange's decision to keep his broken watch and not heal his hands encapsulates the value of accepting one's limitations and past. It speaks to a mature understanding that life, much like the watch, is imperfect but valuable, made meaningful not by the absence of flaws, but by the lessons learned from them. Self-centeredness in beliefs and values ultimately lead to one's downfall with time and prevents them from healing. It's only when you let go of your self-centered beliefs and values and open yourself to humility, open-mindedness, and personal responsibility are you capable to navigate the entirety of the world that is too complicated for any one person to understand. In the 1960s, when Eastern and Western ideas started really being shared with each other, as with all forms of diversity, good mixtures come of them, and also some bad mixtures. I believe Doctor Strange to represent the best ideal mixture of both, while Mordo and Caecilius represent the two harmful mixtures of these results. China, Russia, and other Eastern countries started adopting science, seeing its value, yet they didn't tend to adopt the cornerstones with them, such as transparency, open debate, and peer review, all necessitated by freedom of speech, which they simply do not believe in. This bad mixture debatably led to results such as COVID and Chernobyl, and has far-reaching implications for what other mistakes it'll bring the world in the future. And on the other side, when these Eastern ideas of the fluidity of reality started being adopted by the social science departments of universities in America and Europe, without the Eastern traditions along with them to guide their use and understanding, that too had negative effects. En masse, there were no shortage of Caeciliuses who just simply didn't understand it and ended up damaging society and their own mental health in the process. The postmodernists are a testament to that, where now the social science departments of universities all over the West now have the coherence and maturity of a mental patient. Rather than using these ideas to expand their understanding, they used it to close their understanding and advance cynical personal or political agendas under the guise of equality and social justice. Who needs a well-reasoned debate or facts to advance their cause, when they can merely manipulate complex ideas about the nature of reality itself to re-engineer the world to be whatever you want it to be? Didn't anyone tell you money is just a social construct? And I've decided this monopoly money at this moment in time is real money, so you have to accept it, or else I'll tell the teacher/police. I'm actually reminded of a story a Buddhist friend of mine told me when he lived at a Buddhist centre, and he had a little bit of an argument with another Buddhist. He told them to sweep the floor because it was dirty. The other one responded, well, ultimately the dirt doesn't really exist anyway, and his response was, no, but conventionally it does, so sweep the floor. This adoption of Eastern philosophy without its full context has enabled a form of intellectual relativism that has real-world consequences, not merely just eroding trust in academic institutions, but also further dividing rather than uniting society, encouraging a form of solipsism that destroys society and the individuals themselves, while being blissfully unaware. In this way, postmodernists and others who misapply these ideas serve as real-life cautionary tales, demonstrating the perils of divorcing complex ideas from their ethical and philosophical roots. The best part is, in terms of providing a solution to this balance as Doctor Strange represents and demonstrates, is this solution has existed for as long as these ideas have existed, independently in both cultures. At the foundation of all these beliefs, even before notions of understanding reality came into it at a later part of history, they were all founded on a fundamental idea, albeit in slightly different ways. The foundation of the teachings of Buddha was started from the point of the acceptance of suffering. This was a man who had everything and gave it all away to have nothing, only to learn that a rich man is unhappy because he is rich, and a poor man is unhappy because he is poor. That suffering is an intrinsic part of life. And this is kind of reflected in the foundation of Judeo-Christianity in the book of Genesis, being the original sin of eating the forbidden fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. Both Eastern and Western philosophies converge on ideas of humility and the acceptance of suffering. While expressed differently, Buddhism begins with the acknowledgement of suffering as a universal experience, and the Judeo-Christian tradition emphasizes the flawed nature of humanity through the notion of original sin. Both set a moral framework for ethical and spiritual growth. Only by embracing both suffering and humility can one truly walk the righteous path of both wisdoms without falling on one dysfunctional extreme or the other. Doctor Strange's journey is emblematic of this wisdom. He starts as a character trapped in his own ego and must learn humility and the acceptance of his own limitations and sufferings. His story can be seen as a microcosm of the spiritual, ethical journey suggested by these ancient traditions. Is it possible that this common focus on humility and the acceptance of life's difficulties is not just a cultural artifact but a universal truth? That behind the diverse tapestry of human civilization lies this common thread, one that holds societies together by grounding them in a shared understanding of human limitations? If this is so, then perhaps the real lesson to be drawn from this mingling of Eastern and Western philosophies, as exemplified in Doctor Strange, is the universal need for a balanced approach to life, rooted in the acceptance of our limitations and a humility before the complexities of existence. Far from being mere abstract concepts, these principles serve as our ethical and philosophical North Star, guiding us away from the perilous extremes of characters like Mordo and Caecilius represent. In this way, Doctor Strange doesn't just offer a compelling narrative, but serves as a cinematic lens through which we can reflect on the enduring wisdoms that has guided human civilization throughout the ages, and guided the individuals who make it happen. We never lose our demons. We only learn to live above them. Guru, I've returned, and my life is in ruins. I took your advice to heart, and now I'm broke, my friends and family have disowned me, and I just got out of jail. Ah, my wayward disciple, life is but a meandering river, ever changing, ever flowing. The path you have walked was but a detour on your road to true enlightenment. A detour? Guru, I've lost everything. How is this enlightening? The world is but an illusion, my child. Material losses are irrelevant in the grand tapestry of existence. Also, watch your tone. I don't need this. Irrelevant? Your advice led me astray, Guru. I don't have to put up with this. I'm already late for my happiness injection. Such indulgences are crucial for maintaining my eternal bliss, you understand. That'll be $50. I don't even have $50! Then you are an arrogant, irresponsible bastard. Thank you, come again. But you... Thank you, come again. Now, where was I? Come on, Vane, I don't have all day. So that's the end of the show. And remember, likes and shares are always a treasure. Watching the ads helps the algorithm grow. Join the Bear Army on Patreon. Don't be slow.